It's hard to believe it's already been 9 months since the long-awaited reveal of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and 18 years since Prime 3, yet here we are, and we've received a beautiful second look in the latest Switch Direct. I think this trailer is super intriguing in numerous and unexpected ways as a longtime Metroid fan, and I've finally collected my thoughts and decided how I want to talk about it. The unusual structure and content of this trailer left me with plenty of questions and observations, so let's jump right in and make sure to hit those subscribe and like buttons for plenty more Metroid content. So probably the most burning question for me personally is whether or not this is a multi-planet game, and more broadly, what the scope of it is. Now already we have seen two different planets, a rocky planet hosting a galactic research facility and this new planet Vuros. But what we don't know is whether the planet from the first trailer is just some sort of short intro segment or tutorial like the pirate frigate in Prime 1, or to some extent Norian in Prime 3, or if it represents an entire explorable planet, perhaps one of many like we saw in Prime 3 or Prime Hunters. You see, the voiceover narration in the second trailer seems to imply that much or even all of this game takes place on Vuros. The narrator says when Samus is summoned to Vuros, which implies she was brought here intentionally for a specific reason by someone, sort of like a distress call from games past.
After being summoned to Vuros.
He also says that as she explores the planet, she gains new psychic powers, and that implies she'll be there quite a while gaining power-ups. Perhaps this is another planet caught in a conflict like Prime 2, and Samus spends the vast majority of her time between different biomes on this one planet. It seems like Samus's psychic powers might be tied to the planet itself. The mysterious alien calls her the Chosen One, most likely bestowing a gift of some sort on her that allows her to harness these psychic abilities. These abilities clearly influence the world and ruins around her, but do those powers extend beyond the planet to other worlds that this alien species can also influence? Or does most of this game just take place on a single planet? In the trailer footage, Samus has very few health bars, implying this is the beginning of the game, so I'm curious to see if later she explores other planets, or if most of it takes place here on a single world like more traditional Metroid games. This segues into my second question, which is, why does there seem to be portals everywhere? Between both trailers, I've identified several different portals, and it's hard to tell if the world structure has changed a little bit on Vuros between these videos, especially in this intro segment. Do these portals simply replace the elevators we had in Prime 1 and 2, or the ship traveling cutscenes we had in Prime 3? Or are these portals a bigger part of the story, possibly involving Samus's psychic abilities, or the meaning behind the Beyond subtitle? The beginning of the trailer implies that Samus arrives there through a portal though, so if she arrived from another planet, why would there also be other portals around the same planet? So many questions around these portals. Some of the verbiage in this trailer also seems to semi-contradict itself. The narrator initially says Samus was transported there unexpectedly, and the trailer footage implies she arrived there through a portal, but later says Samus was summoned. Did the alien race cause or create the portal that sends her to Vuros? I guess you could say she was summoned there unexpectedly, but how? I do have one theory around this, which goes back to the first trailer we saw last year. At this point in the trailer, we see the Federation soldiers hurrying to move some sort of artifact or object to safety away from the space pirates. Could this be some sort of artifact from Vuros? If the planet exists beyond chartered space, somewhere beyond, maybe they are studying a strange artifact found from it, which is why the beginning takes place in this research facility. Perhaps during the opening battle with Sylux, Samus is somehow exposed to the artifact, or the artifact is used to create a portal that brings her to Vuros, and maybe it accidentally brings along Sylux or some Metroids for the ride who are also searching for this planet. And once she's there, the alien species exposes secrets of why their planet or their artifacts are under attack or pursuit. As for this cool-looking alien race, I'm really curious to see if this is an entirely new species, or if this species has been alluded to before in past Prime games. Last year, I made a video about which alien species we might see make a return in Prime 4, and there are two alien species that are mentioned but so far unrevealed in the Prime trilogy, which are the Ela and the Necren. Both are mentioned in Luminoth lore in Prime 2 as advanced species roughly on par with the Chozo, and the Ela are mentioned again in the lore of Prime 3. Could this be the Ela? I'm so curious about this, and I think this would be so cool if this small lore entry made it back 2 decades later. I'm also curious to see if this species actually is as glowing and sort of interdimensional in nature as the trailer shows, or if this is just some sort of hologram or visual. Maybe beyond is referring to a higher dimension or interdimensional conflict that this alien race is a part of. Another interesting question is whether or not Samus loses her powers at the start of the game. As I mentioned earlier, Samus is shown with only 1 or 2 health bars in this video, yet she already seems to have staples like the Charge Beam and Morph Ball. If I had to guess, I would say she doesn't lose her powers just like in Prime 3, and instead gains new suit power-ups in combination with psychic abilities, so there's plenty of upgrades to grab, much like we saw in Prime 3 with the corruption upgrades. One of the biggest questions this trailer raises is whether or not Prime 4 is a cross-gen title. The presentation of all this is a little confusing. Obviously, the game will be playable on both Switch 1 and 2 either way due to backwards compatibility, but this trailer raises some major questions about whether we'll receive a native Switch 2 release with potential upgrades. In fact, I think the two strangest things about this trailer are that we didn't receive a release date, and that it sort of feels like a half presentation. I certainly don't mean that as an insult, but a lot of times these sort of extended gameplay looks end with a montage of broader snapshots of the game, or some other clips to show different environments and give you a better scope of the experience. I'm wondering if the release date was left off intentionally because this game will launch alongside Switch 2, regardless of whether it receives a native Switch 2 version or not. It's possible that next week at the Switch 2 Direct, we'll see what I'd call the other half of a presentation like this, some sort of full trailer or montage of different scenes and clips from the game that also provides a release date. To me, this video, although awesome in its own way, feels sort of like a check-in or second helping of the first trailer, which was also a sort of isolated gameplay slice of sorts. Obviously, the second look showed a lot more, but it still kind of feels like Nintendo and Retro aren't fully revealing their cards yet on the full scope of this game. For a long time, I was in the camp that Prime 4 would be a true cross-gen release, meaning the Switch 2 version would have clear graphical enhancements. I've sort of changed my mind about this after the way Nintendo structured this reveal. To me, showing this trailer at the Switch 1 Direct seems to really hit home that yes, this is just a Switch 1 game, and although it will be playable on Switch 2, and maybe even launch alongside it, this is still a Switch 1 game at heart. I think Nintendo showed this trailer in a Switch 1 Direct to avoid implying that this is running on Switch 2 hardware, or even that this is what Switch 2 graphics will look like in general and cause further confusion. Again, I think Prime 4 will show up at the Switch 2 Direct in some form, now that it's been shown as a Switch 1 game, but only as some sort of short montage clip with a release date attached. And if there is a native Switch 2 version, I think it will likely be a Breath of the Wild situation where the graphical difference is very minimal, perhaps just a slight resolution boost like we saw with Breath of the Wild where it ran at 900p on Switch and 720p on Wii U. Maybe this will run at 1440p on Switch 2, with some very minor refinements, while only running at 900p on Switch 1 like Prime Remastered. A couple other interesting notes and observations from this trailer. I love the subtle but epic background music. It includes riffs and tones that sound right at home in past Metroid locations like Talon Overworld, Phendrana Drifts, and Elysia. In fact, this whole trailer just feels surprisingly old-school Metroid in the best ways. It still surprises me how much this feels like a continuation rather than a reboot or reimagining. I also think Prime 4 will offer a motion-based control scheme option like Prime Remastered. Some of the psychic abilities seem to be what I would call motion control friendly, such as guiding beams, drawing circles, moving levers, and so on, but not as dramatic as Prime 3, so you can still play with regular dual analog controls. I'm also curious to see how far Retro pushes these open environments. Is this just sort of an isolated introductory area to provide broader imagery of what the planet looks like, or will multiple biomes and areas feature these beautiful and expansive views of the horizon? I think this looks wonderful so far and seems surprisingly well done for the Switch hardware, which often struggles with these open vistas. And finally, I have to talk about the red suit shown at the end. Yes, this is awesome, and the environment it's featured in looks very different from the rest of the trailer. I wonder if this is either a more industrial biome of Vuros, or a separate planet or space station entirely. This clip seems to imply the energy sphere is powering up Samus and giving her this red suit, but technically we don't know that since it also kind of looks like yet another portal, so it's possible she already had this suit and is simply emerging in yet another location. I'm really curious to see what kind of new powers this suit and others grant her. I think the suit designs in this game are absolutely stunning so far. So what are your thoughts on all of this? Leave a comment with your own ideas and let's discuss. And please remember to hit those subscribe and like buttons for more retro and upcoming Metroid content.